Good evening, my name is Sam Meakin and I will be your host for this joyous episode that's about to follow the May 4th edition of Monday Night Fitba on Radio Saltaire. Now, we're never ones to be self-congratulatory when it's not absolutely called for, but in the first ever episode of this show back on the 15th of September last year, there was one thing that we longed for, one thing that we wanted to be discussing on this particular episode, and Edinburgh 1-2. And this weekend we got what we wanted. We even got some Hearts fans demonstrably happy about it. Now, we're well aware that Alan Stubbs and Hibs have got a lot more work to do before this season can be deemed an unequivocal success, but on this show we're going to look at the causes to celebrate both teams' achievements, not just at the weekend, but over the entirety of the regulation 2014-15 league season. Regulation comes in obviously because the playoffs represent a huge question mark over what's left to go. The panel is slightly skewed in the favour of the champions, but the reason behind that is obvious. With at least 2 more games for the Hibs, there will be a lot more Hibs chat to come this season. Hey, Craig?
I hope so.
So let's meet the panel. Representing the champions, we have Sean Meakin and debutant Kenny Hall. Say hello, Kenny.
Hi, how you doing?
Say it again while we can actually hear you.
Hello, how are we doing?
There we go. Okay, and for the playoff favourites, the Hibs, we have Craig Leach. Say hello, Craig.
Good evening.
There we go.
Can we please stop with the champions chat? I
got it in twice in the intro, and then we'll not really mention
the history books, Craig. And also, I'm guessing, I'm taking it, favourites is purely based upon the bookies' odds, not necessarily our preference.
Well, favourites would be our preference, Sean. Yes, we've throughout we've put forward a front of a united front for Edinburgh football.
I do like Queens.
Oh well.
Nice. Right, hang on.
The bogey team.
Say that again, Sean, because we're having some slight sound issues.
I said I do like Queens, though.
Right, okay. That one is one for the end of season clips programme, where Sean admits his love for Queens. Okay, right. We are going to, in terms of the plan for the show ahead, we're going to discuss Hearts, and then we're going to discuss Hibs, mainly focusing on the games at the weekend, but touching a wee bit on the season gone by. Then we will try and fit in an objective view of the playoff games to come over the next couple of weekends that don't involve either team, but could have a massive impact on Hibs for what is left of this season, but also on both clubs for next season, and how the SPL and what remains of the Championship look. And then if we can fit it in, which is unlikely, but we'll see how it goes, we will discuss some Player of the Year banter, because there's been a fair bit of it after last night's result. So right now we're going to move on to discuss Hearts. We will be back after 30 seconds of Derek Ray.
Stanton's boots, Robinson, and Hibs looking very exposed here. Nicholson with the pass, it might fall for Billy King. He can finish it. Billy King, 2-0 to Hearts, and the message is clear at Tynecastle. Not on this patch of Edinburgh land, not in a derby, no relegation today.
And we're back on Monday Night Football. Let's get straight to it, lads. Let's discuss Hearts 2, Rangers 2. Didn't really feel like a draw in the end, did it?
No, I think the way it went down, it was a lot more joyous than it probably would have been, say it had been 1-0, 1-1, 2-1, 2-2, or even if we had went 2-0 up and they had pegged us back. The way it came about just really capped off the end of the season well, whereas a 2-2 draw usually would have been slightly disappointing. I think it just really set off the celebrations in style, just the way we snatched it at the end and gave them the "you well thought."
Okay, Kenny, let's start you as you mean to go on here, mate, with some controversy. We'll obviously not talk too much about the first half, but there were some debatable decisions in the first half from referee Callum Murray, retiring referee. Some Jambos will be delighted to hear. What were your thoughts on... We'll concentrate on the first one first, the free kick. Obviously Hearts defend the free kick poorly, but for you, was it a free kick? It looked like Dean Shields made the most of it, shall we say.
I think, having watched the highlights back, you can see, I think it's Oztuck originally skews the clearance, I think, and it was quite hit up at that point. I think Shields played for it. He won it. Was it a free kick? I don't think he needs to stick a leg out. I don't think he needs to give him the opportunity to go down. He did. The referee bought it, end of. But as you say, they've got to defend the set piece better than what they did. As I said, as a defender, you don't give the guy the chance to go down. He went down, he was clever, he bought the free kick. So be it. Okay,
more controversy then potentially in the second goal, or at least the lead up to the second goal. I'll get a general consensus from the entire room. I'll bring you in on this as well, Craig. I'm assuming that you've seen it. Was it a penalty? First at the time, and then secondly after 10 replays, because I think the two may be quite different opinions.
At the time, stonewaller. I thought it was an absolute stonewaller at the time, viewing it live. On reflection, Cammy Bell gets a touch on the ball. That's undoubted, he gets a touch on the ball. However, before he's got a touch on the ball, he's taken Osman So out. So, I don't know. I'm going to sit on the fence in this one. I don't know. It all depends on the outlook on it. It's a bit like the handball rule, where it's a bit up in the air in the sense that if it's deliberate, free kick. If it's not deliberate, is it still a free kick? You know, he's taken a bit of the man, he's taken a bit of the ball. I really don't know. Sean,
Craig, I'm going to come to you first before we go to Sean to give his goalie's opinion on it. But for you, I want an objective view. If that happens at Ibrox and Osman So plays for Rangers, do you think it's given as a penalty there? Is there any of that question mark?
Nah, that's always a penalty. If that's in Rangers' favour, it's a penalty. But obviously I never had the chance to see it first hand, even on the telly, because I was at Falkirk. But when I seen the first replay, I was like, right, the establishment's clearly engineering Rangers back into the top flight. Because for me, even though it was on a replay, it was a stonewaller. But I think looking at it several times for the 300 different angles, I think the referee might have got it right and not given a penalty.
By accident, or because he's a fantastic referee? Or do you know, was it a fantastic decision, or was it one that he bottled but in actual fact he got away with because the replays kind of show he had a reason to?
I think it could be a bit of both. But obviously, you know, if you're seeing that first hand, if you're a Hearts fan, you're screaming for it. If you're a Rangers fan, you're a bit like, oh, didn't give it. And if it's the other way around, you'd be completely the same. But I think that he's maybe it's been lucky that he's got the call right, because I think, like I say, I think if it's up the other end, it's a penalty for Rangers.
Okay, Sean, give us the goalkeeping analysis on it.
Firstly, from my angle where I was watching the game, I could see Cammy Bell get the hand to the ball.
So could I
could see it clearly. I don't know how the referee necessarily saw it from his positioning, but I saw it, and at the real time I didn't think it was a penalty, purely because I thought Cammy Bell had got a touch to it. Now, as Kenny said, looking back at the replays, Cammy Bell does get a touch to the ball, but he plays the man first, ever so slightly before, but that's where it hangs in the balance. I think possibly the ref gave the right decision. However, I've no idea how he came to it, because he can't necessarily see the right decision.
Is there any question about how far Cammy Bell diverts the ball? In terms of, yes, he gets a touch on the ball, but if it's still within playing distance, reasonable playing distance of Osman So, then in theory the fact that doesn't necessarily justify completely wiping him out of the game.
He has still slightly diverted the course of the ball.
No, he has, but what I mean is that if I can totally understand that decision being justified if Cammy Bell comes out and knocks the ball out the penalty area, but when he literally kind of fingertips it 2 yards, So can readjust and get there if he's not completely wiped out. That seems to have come into other decisions where they've said, yeah, but he's still got an opportunity there if he's not wiped out.
It's still substantial enough a touch on the ball, I would say.
Okay, Kenny?
I think in reference to that, I mean, I've not seen the position of the officials, but linesman, should he not be kind of level with that? Should he not be able to see if the referee's on the blind side of Osman So, certainly maybe consult his linesman a bit, because it's contentious enough, and I don't know what impact the linesman had on it at the time.
Yeah, they maybe have over the mics consulted. The one thing that I'm going to throw in, just because it occurred to me very, very quickly at the game, like Sean, I saw Cammy Bell's touch on it straight away.
I think I was going to say exactly what you were going to say.
Yeah, well, don't steal it off me.
Okay.
So yeah, I saw Cammy Bell's touch on it straight away, but also saw him wipe out Osman So and thought, well, it's a bit 50-50. But if you go back to the second game of the season at Tynecastle, Jack Hamilton does the exact same thing, but actually gets a more decisive touch on the ball and then wipes out Danny Handling. and yet that was a penalty. Willie Collum gave that as a penalty, and this one wasn't. Now I think Jack Hamilton's was less a penalty than it was a penalty, so if both were not given, I could completely understand that. The problem we've got again is complete inconsistency from the establishment across two massively high profile games that could have at least played a huge part, equally huge part, in the way that had Liam Craig scored that penalty. We've no idea how that changes the start of the season. So it's just that inconsistency that I think rankles with a lot of fans. And when that started to be brought up in the stadium, it kind of just increased that rage that was there.
Yep. And
that rage was completely solidified by, again, we have to say, some pretty poor defending. How badly do we think the Hearts players' heads had gone from that penalty incident, or were they just a bit ragged anyway?
I'll jump straight on this purely just it really incenses me. They go over it on Match of the Day every second week when a players get into the byline and the centre halves drop towards the goal line. There's no need in it. They're obviously going to be cutting it back. If one drops back and the other one stays at the 6-yard box, you've got both covered. Whereas because Ozturk's trying to drop back, and I love Ozturk, I think he's had a brilliant season, but it's just naivety, him dropping back and almost getting a toe to the ball, whereas Kenny Miller just stands, and because those players have dropped off, he's got free rein at the 6-yard box. It's naivety and stupidity from the defenders.
But in the positive sense, we've now got you saying you love Ozturk and you like Queens in the same episode. So you're cutting down my head in here. Kerry, what was your view of Hearts defensively? Was it a psychological reason for conceding that goal as much as a tactical reason?
Potentially. There was a lot of incensement, if that's even a word.
It is now.
It is now, exactly. No, I mean, one end of the park to the other straight away, and as Sean's saying, he's got to the byline, he's cut it back. How many bodies it went through before it's got to Kenny Miller? 2, 3 maybe. Positionally not great. For me, it's a ball the defence should be dealing with. By and large this season they've obviously defended well. At the end of the day, you don't have a goal difference of plus 70 when you've not defended well. It's simple as that. But in instances like that, I think it's travelled through far too many bodies for it not to raise question marks about defending, in my opinion.
Hearts had a shot across the bows earlier in the game where Rangers had managed to get to byline and square it, and it had gone right across the face of the goal, and I think it was maybe Vukic at the back post couldn't quite reach it.
He could have cut that back for Shields, I think.
And that was a very similar, in fact there was another one where Vukic got his shot in but it went past the post, and they were similar kind of crosses across that quote unquote corridor of uncertainty that Hearts failed to deal with. They should have probably learnt from those, but it did seem like the heads had gone completely in that period of the game.
I would say a part of that goes down to as well missing the organisational skills of Neil Alexander behind them. You saw it earlier on in the game, the one you're talking about, when Kenny Miller hits the ball across the goal. Scott Gallagher's caught in two minds there. He doesn't know whether to treat it as a shot. If he's treating that as a cross, he has to shuffle across his goals to try and cover anyone coming in at that, whereas he does a half dive, doesn't he quite go for it, and just completely takes himself out of the game. I don't know if the defenders catch on to that very much, but if it was me, that wouldn't be instilling much confidence for me, so maybe that's why they're tracking back to the line to try and cover for that.
Okay, while you brought that up, that's an interesting point, my one on the slight kind of negative sides of this, which we will get off very quickly as we get on to the second half. But on Scott Gallagher, we've only seen him now over a couple of games, but that is possibly all we're going to get to see from him. Sean, has he shown enough to you to be kept on as a second choice, or would you foresee Jack Hamilton claiming that role as his own and Scott Gallagher leaving?
I would prefer the latter. I would rather have Jack Hamilton. Jack Hamilton's by no means whatsoever even close to being the finished article. There's still a lot of polishing that needs to be done, but he's got a lot more potential than Scott Gallagher. Scott Gallagher's a decent bit older, just doesn't seem to be to the standard that we should be looking for. You're starting to see now kind of the reasons why Rangers let him go. I didn't think he's there. Obviously Neil Alexander sees something in him because he recommended for him to come to Hearts, but never looks comfortable with his distribution, never seems to command very well, and we've not seen enough of him as a shot stopper for that to be an outstanding trait that would keep him there, Antti-Niemi style. So he's not done enough for me even to be happy for us to keep him. It's just, if he goes, he goes. It doesn't really matter. If we can bring someone else in who's better, then brilliant.
Okay, let's move on to the more positive side of things then. We saw a few changes from Robbie Neilson that did seem to change the emphasis of the game. Possibly changes that in theory could lessen the quality on the park objectively, at least the Gallardo for Kenny Anderson substitution. Anderson hasn't proved themselves to be quite at the calibre of Gallardo yet, but what we did start to see in the second half was a bit of flashbacks to the last game at Ibrox, a few flashbacks to some other of the slightly less convincing wins that Hearts have had, where teams managed to get 10 behind the ball and we look very, very static in possession. It gets to Gomez, and Gomez does his usual game, which is to slow it down and find a certain pass, but ultimately then allowing them to regroup and not a huge amount of movement ahead of the ball. Kenny Anderson coming on changed that. Zeefuik obviously presented a different challenge for the Rangers back 4 or 5 as it would become. What were the big deciding factors for you, but beside the goals themselves, what were the big deciding factors in Hearts getting back into the game for you guys?
I think you touched on it there with Anderson's introduction. I know what you say. There's a lot of similarity certainly between Gomez, Gallardo. Now that's not to say neither of them can thread a ball, because evidently in the first half with Jamie Walker's chance, Gallardo's threaded it. It's a great pass. Anderson, as you say, there's a bit of the sort of Colin Cameron's in the sense that he likes to run beyond, and that gives the Rangers, defensively, it gives Rangers something completely different to think about. That for me was massive, because as you said, it was a bit static, and at times when I've seen Hearts, as you say, in the more less convincing scenarios, it's almost like, and I relate to Ibrox here, the most recent visit to Ibrox, where it went from side to side, it went in, it was dealt with, repeat process. The introduction of Anderson, I thought, changed that a little bit. Although he didn't have a great effect in terms of on the ball, it's different movement, and obviously Zeefuik as well.
Was Zeefuik's impact surprising, given that one of the biggest criticisms of him has been his lack of movement off the ball at times? As we say, we generally were crying out for movement off the ball. Zeefuik came on, and a few Hearts fans, shall we put it, were slightly they were slightly frustrated or slightly confused by the thinking there. They wanted Keating's on earlier, they wanted more mobility, but Zeefuik kind of drew the ball to him almost in those situations. Why was it that he had such an impact in this one when I pretty much failed at Ibrox the last time against the same team?
I think the main thing with him there, obviously he's going up against tired legs. His lack of mobility isn't necessarily a bad thing, although I don't think he's actually got a lack of mobility. He's being asked to play a role that is limiting his mobility.
Okay.
But I think going into that position at that time of the game, also Sam Nicholson never had his greatest game. Jamie Walker is really playing through the centre now. He doesn't give us much width. With missing Billy King in that, we were lacking natural width either side to try and stretch their defence. But by putting him up there and occupying the two centre halves, that then meant you could get runners beyond and in and around him and cause bother that way. So a lot of the time I thought El Hasnoui had a good game, a lot better game than So. That was one of the poorer performances we've seen from So as of late, which shows since he came back, he's been like a house on fire. But it does show there is that inconsistency there, that we do need the other players to step up. But El Hasnoui was dropping off the front a lot and getting them moving, which was good for tiring their legs for Zeefuik coming on later on. But Zeefuik just standing up there and occupying them and giving that space in front of them for the runs to the edge of the box was a brilliant thing going forward near the end of the game, and it created a lot more opportunities.
You look at his 2 goals, and obviously the pace wasn't evident in either of them. It didn't have to be. The first one, I don't think he's getting nearly as much credit as he should be for the header. He's falling backwards to generate the power he has and the direction. I think Cammy Bell, I heard, was getting a bit of a hard time for being too far across his goal, but let's face it, he ain't expecting what was about to unfold. And secondly, the second goal, in typical sort of Scottish fashion, Andy Walker highlighted that it was just sheer strength. Well, it was when he brought it down, but we'll just forget about the touch from his right on his left. It took 3 defenders out of the game, and he's drilled it in with his weaker foot. But that's the thing, I mean, it's just a completely, for me, he brings a different dimension, although he's not lightning quick. I mean, as Sean said there, he's had more of an impact than what So did for the entire time that he was on the park. So, was it 12 goals in 15 games? You can't really argue with that.
He's been obviously heavily criticised from out with the club because of his stature, shall we put it. And to be honest, at times I think Hearts fans have been incredibly quick to use that as a stick to beat him with as well, and that they've lost all perspective of this idea that he scored 12 and 15. Even before he came on, he had scored 10 and 14, which had been a huge factor in taking Hearts to the title. A lot of people forget that James Keating's had his real sustained run of form when he was the only striker that we had. He had to have a run of form then because we had no one else. Just as he was starting to fade, Zayfout came in and assumed that mantle and kind of then carried us a wee bit in terms of the goal charts, or at least reinvigorated the rest of the team. Has he been given enough credit for that? Maybe not £300,000 worth of credit. You know, we don't have to all be, you know, banging down Hearts' door for them to sign him, but I feel like sometimes maybe his role in what ultimately has been a hugely successful season has been underplayed somewhat. I think it has. I think a lot of the, as you've said there's a lot of fans who still look at him as a big lump up top and maybe look at it as I'm being a bit lucky, which just isn't the case whatsoever. On that point, I would love it if we could get the money together to sign him, because he showed just there, especially at our level, or the level we're going to be going to as well, he's got that wee bit extra class and a wee bit of an X factor that he seems to be able to come up with something or create that wee opening for someone else to come up with something that some of our other players don't necessarily have. You can't argue with the stats that are there. You can't argue with unlike Malonga at times this season, he does work hard. You can see that he does work hard, and every battle he's in, every 50-50, he's never shirked one. He's never went, I can't be bothered with this. Certainly not that I've seen so far. And obviously he shouldn't be when he's the size that he is. He should be physically commanding, but it would be easy for him to go, we're playing Alloa away from home, or 2-0 up, whatever, and just kind of just phone it in for the rest of the game. He's really not. He's really wanted to try and make his mark, and it's really showed at this point in time. So I certainly haven't criticised him at any point, and a lot of the criticism he has got I've not understood. Kenny, what are your thoughts on Zayfout's potential presence at Tynecastle going forward? I mean, the argument I've heard quite a lot is but it's only the Championship. He's a paid player in the Championship. He can only score goals against the teams that Hearts are competing with, and he's scored 12 times in 15 games. It could have been 13 had he not tucked away a penalty, am I right, on his debut as well for his hat-trick. And I've also heard that but a lot of them have been penalties. How bad's our penalty record been though as well? You've got to remember that. So you've still got to score the penalties. Would I pay £300,000 for him and offer him a 4-year contract? Probably not. If we could get the funds together to muster a reasonable deal and maybe offer him a 1-year deal, 18-month deal, I'd probably take that, because again, in my opinion, regardless of what you say, you can't argue with the goal scoring record at all for me. Okay, let's round up on Hearts then with a wee chat about the scenes afterwards. We saw how delighted Anne Budge was. We saw Robbie Neilson crack a legitimate smile. We saw Craig Levine give a wee kind of jig. Took us back about 15 years to when he was in the dugouts. What were your guys' reaction to it? Firstly, can I say, if anyone's not watched the Hearts official video on the Facebook page and other things, watch it just purely for Sam Nicholson's reaction to the winners' medal. I'm not going to say any more than that, but it's pretty hilarious. He can't quite believe how small it is. But it was brilliant. I think, as I said at the start of the show, the way we went about getting the draw in that game just set it off. If
it had just been a bleak kind of 2-2 game that had kind of seen its way out. If it had been 2-2 in the first half and the second half nothing really happened, the atmosphere wouldn't have been as electric as it was when we actually took when Danny Wilson lifted the cup. So it was really a lot more positive than it looked like it was going to be 20 minutes prior, and so it should have been for the season. I know Ross has been saying in previous weeks, didn't matter the score, didn't matter whatsoever. It did.
Kenny, it's a strange situation, and it's the kind of thing that as Scottish football fans you're just conditioned to forget about, non-Old Firm fans. It's a strange thing to actually be presented with a trophy in your home stadium, isn't it?
Big time. I mean, I had absolutely no idea what to expect, nor did I see there being 3, 4, 5 selfie sticks amongst the players. I thought it was quite incredible as well. But it's, at the end of the day, winning's a habit you never get tired of, regardless of where you are. Predominantly in Scottish football, obviously it's the Old Firm that are lifting trophies. It's great, it's magic, and as you say, it's the first time I've seen Hearts lift a trophy in their own backyard. Brilliant, absolutely fantastic. And we've been lucky enough, I mean, from 1998 to now to see 4 trophies. I certainly, my old man, I think, went 28 odd years, however many it was, 36 years. Aye, so no, it's brilliant. As I said, it's winning something. You never get sick of winning. At the end of the day, you never get sick of winning trophies regardless of what it is. And no, the scenes were great. Everybody was clearly delighted. Everybody does seem in it together as well, so hopefully they can keep the vast majority of the squad together. When I say keep, I mean in terms of letting go of the players that want to let go, but not necessarily letting go of the ones that don't want to. So no, great, fantastic.
Okay, Craig, no one ever gets sick of winning, but do you get sick of us talking? Are you sick of us talking about it now?
No, he's well-deserved champions. He's earned your right to talk about.
Okay, well, we'll talk about it for another 20 minutes.
You're not just saying that because you're outnumbered, are you, Craig?
Okay.
No, I've seen Hibs lift the same trophy, albeit it didn't want to see us lift it, but that was, I can relate to what you're saying. That was the first time I was only 7, I think, when we done. That was my first season as a season ticket holder as well. So I'm a bit thinking, we're lifting trophies at Easter Road, this is going to be amazing. Didn't quite turn out like that.
Okay, so we've had enough of Hearts for the time being, though. We will circle back a wee bit when we get onto the player of the season chat at the very end of the show, but right now I'm going to go to a couple of ads and then we will come back to discuss playoff favourites, the Hibs. Craig, get geared up, son, you're carrying this yourself, you better be really positive here. Stay tuned to Monday Night Football on Radio Salta.
Craig handling. Allan. Oh, and it's a wonderful ball and a terrific goal. Jason Cummings. Hibs have a lift off in 2015. I have to say they just deserve it for me. What a wonderful, wonderful ball by Scott Allan. Simply takes out his feet. He doesn't even look, he plays it pretty blind. He just whips it into that area. It's great movement by Cummings and the finish is exquisite. Here you go.
Thank you for staying tuned to Monday Night Football on Radio Salta. Craig, are you ready?
Yes.
Geared up?
Yep.
By all accounts, a very positive day out at the Falkirk Stadium.
Indeed it was. And
about time too as well to get a wee bit revenge over Falkirk.
Aye, exactly. I know it's been brought up a wee bit about my wee comments in case we didn't win the semi-final, but I think that
Hashtag heartbroken.
Aye, that's the one. But look, that was purely playing on the romance of the Scottish Cup, wanting to win it, but looking at the bigger picture, the promotion is essential. We didn't want to be stuck in this division another season. No disrespect to the teams that are in it, but this isn't where we want to be. We want to be in the top league. So it was good to finally get a win over Falkirk. They might just bring up that, we didn't care, season's finished, we've got the cup final coming up, but we still had to go out there and get the win, and we were dominant from start to finish.
While we're on the subject of hashtags, just to take a slight detour, get in touch with us at Monday Night Football if you've anything to say about tonight's show or the week of football that we've just encountered or the week ahead. We will be on right throughout the summer on Monday Night Football, and we now have a home as well as Radio Saltaire. We have an internet home, www.mondaynightfootball.com. Fitba is how you spell football, which is technically Fitba, but who cares? Ryan McGowan, can he say either, so it doesn't matter. So we've also got a forum there, so if you want to tell us anything and you're too shy to say it on the Twitter, then tell us on the forum. You can be a wee bit more anonymous on there. Craig, let's get back to it. Right, 3,500 fans through at Falkirk, all expectant, as football fans tend to be. Hibs got off to a flyer though. That says a lot about this Hibs team, as opposed to, it's interesting because you can make parallels for 2 weeks ago at the Cup semi-final. You can see massive Hibs support, outnumbering Falkirk, and they failed to perform. What was the big difference this weekend?
I think it's knowing that that Rangers were maybe playing at the same time, that we knew that we had to go out and set a marker really quickly, just so even if we go a goal up, Rangers can go 10 up. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. You can scoring more goals doesn't give you more points. So I think that was vital to it. Also, I just think that they knew that this was there's been a lot. There's always this talk about the Hibs bottle. The cup, the semi-final, wasn't about bottle. We just couldn't take our chances. Whereas today was a chance for a lot of people were expecting us to draw, Rangers to win, us to get beat, Rangers to draw or win or whatever. So it was good to get the early goal to sort of settle. It's really settled everybody down fairly quickly.
Okay, let's talk about the lineup first, because there was a few interesting things. From an outsider's perspective, what's the score with Al-Alagoui? Is he carrying an injury? I
still don't think he's fully fit yet.
Okay, and I don't think nursing him back.
Yeah, I think so. I think that they knew that yesterday would be all right with Malonga and Cummins up top, and that Al-Alagoui is going to be more needed for the whether it's Queen of the South or Rangers, and then potentially the game after that as well. So I think that he was at the game. He was sitting not too far from where I was, and he seemed in quite a smiley, happy mood. I think it's just really not. He's been out for so long, and then he's came back and he's played like 90-minute spells since he came back in, so I think it was just a chance to rest him. It was
interesting off the back of that though that Alan Stubbs mentioned in a few of his interviews about his confidence in his strike force, that they can lead Hibs back to the Premier League, and he seemed to specifically name check Cummings and Malonga. Do you think they are now the preferred two throughout this playoff run, or will Al-Alagoui be used in a 3-man rotation with them?
Well, I think if it's going to be a rotation, it'll be between Malonga and Al-Alagoui. I can't see Cummins getting dropped, and he doesn't deserve to be dropped either. But I don't know. It depends on who we come up against. I think that if it's Rangers, then Al-Alagoui will play. If it's Queen of the South, then Malonga might play. Purely, I don't know why I think that. I don't know if it's maybe Freed could physically unsettle whoever plays at McGregor, McCulloch, whoever plays at the back for Rangers.
I suppose you could argue that Zayfouk's cameo at the weekend would show that Al-Alagoui would be more suited to that kind of situation.
Obviously different sort of styles of player and different builds, but Farid likes to throw himself about a bit and unsettle defenders. So I think it's just he's going to weigh up and see who we actually get before sort of pinning his tail on. It's going to be whatever 2 out of the 3, or maybe even go back to just a 1. We don't know.
Pinning his tail on which donkey were you going to say there?
What did I say?
Nothing. You said pinning the tail on, and pinning the tail normally goes on a donkey, which when you're referring to your own strikers, it's probably a weird metaphor to go with. But we'll go on anyway. Someone who definitely did not appear donkey-like in the first 5 minutes was Martin Boyle. That was some go, which I claim a wee bit credit for, because I did mention about that whole having him in the right channel. Maybe he just needs one finish, and he's got that finish across the goalie nailed now.
It was a brilliant finish. I've said it before that I don't think he's got that sort of composure when he gets in the box, and he wasn't really that far in the box either. He was still quite wide. Mm-hmm. And to get it across McDonald in the way that he did, he just put his foot clean through it and drilled it past him. But he started to move off. He picked the ball up in the sort of the middle of our half. Had a wee run, gave it into the Championship Player of the Year, Scott Allan, who threaded a lovely,
setting that up for later,
threading a lovely ball through to him. And I think, like I say, that Boyle's going to be the sort of player that when he has time to think, then that's when it all maybe goes pear-shaped. But he had to pass or shoot, and he shot and it went in.
It's interesting what you say there about him choosing to take the shot early, which is possibly what goes with what we were talking about before. He seemed to be a player who was essentially just unsure when he got in the box. He wasn't quite sure what was required. He wasn't sure, but especially because he tends to be running at pace where he gets there. He's not really sure necessarily how many more touches are required, and he ended up getting caught too close to the keeper. He was narrowing his own angle, or he was, taking the ball too far out wide, things like that. He now seems to, because he has that shot mastered, the finish across the keeper, he's now just getting to a point where he knows that's an option, and then hitting it early in those situations can obviously catch the keeper off guard. As we actually saw Malonga utilise the same finish later with McDonald, which seemed to catch him out both times.
Yeah, I think it's as good as it was from Boyle. I think McDonald was caught off guard a wee bit by it. I don't think he expected the shot to come across at all. I think he was maybe waiting for him to cut it back to Cummins or Malonga or whoever was in the box at the time. So it's good that as we're getting to where the season for us starts now. We've done the as much as we'd have loved to go up as champions, there was for whatever reasons we've not done it. We started the season terribly, so I think that that's, if you look at the way that I know we finished 21 points behind, and I'm not trying to sound like if we'd have won one or two more games it would have been a difference, but if we'd have started the season in the same way that Hearts did, because for me, and I'm not taking anything away from Hearts at all, I think if we'd have been a bit more challenging to Hearts, it might have been a bit different, whereas Hearts built up a lead quickly and just coasted. They knew that they weren't going to get caught, so they didn't feel any pressure.
Yeah, I certainly understand where you're coming from. It's a slightly contentious issue, but no, it makes perfect sense. Right.
If there's someone breathing down your neck,
then it challenges you.
Yeah,
that's what I mean.
It gets you looking behind you a lot more than if you've got a clear distance between you and another. If you're a sprinter and someone's right on your shoulder, then you're thinking about it more, whereas Usain Bolt, when you've got 10 yards on the other person, you're coasting. So I see your point.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Sounding like a bitter Hibby. Let's put that out there.
You managed it perfectly without trying. Okay, let's talk about Alan Stubbs then. With that in mind, again, looking back a wee bit in the history of the show, I remember having a discussion round about November time where Hibs had started to come out of the really bad patch, but were still inconsistent, possibly even being kind. There was mistakes cropping up time and again that were costing Hibs, needless draws at home, a wee bit carelessness that existed at the time. And we spoke at that point about the real importance of setting achievable targets, that rather than looking at Hearts, whatever they were, 12, 13 points ahead, and thinking we've got to try and catch them or it's failure, instead setting your objectives at Rangers or let's make sure we get second. Alan Stubbs didn't necessarily do that at the time, and it did appear that's when the first thing of the whole bitterness came about, when Scott Robertson was saying Hearts can't possibly do that, match that point tally in the second quarter, and then they just did it. But what they've done over the last kind of 10 to 12 weeks, I'd say, is exactly that, and it's gone a wee bit unnoticed, and again it's now been construed as bitterness because of when it's come back. I personally think it's intelligent management, which is that Stubbs has now stopped referring to Hearts. For the last 10 weeks or so, he doesn't mention Hearts, he doesn't mention first, he just says about we know where we want to be. And again, you're like, well, that's not really where you want to be, but ultimately it's the only possible place. Yeah. So now Hibs have managed that, and they're going in with a high almost as if they had won the league, because as we say, that was all that was possible after the first 12-15 games of this season. How big a factor psychologically is that momentum that Hibs are carrying?
It's massive, because we went into the stage where when we played Rangers we could have went 10 points ahead of them, when they beat us at Easter Road. And I think we ended up being 7. When Rangers played their games in hand and caught up, they were 7 in front of us. So we've managed to turn that round again. Even going back to earlier on in the season, we were sitting 9th at one point. I'm sure it was maybe mid-September, coming up to the end of September.
There was a league table, and as it stands, league table, with about, I think, an hour gone in one of the match days, and Hibs were bottom of the league, and they turned it around in that game and got a result. But that's literally how bleak it was at a certain point in the season.
A few games in, we were sitting ninth. Rangers are, it was all about Hearts and Rangers. Obviously Hearts then coasted it, but Rangers at one point, they were about maybe 8-9 points ahead of us. We clawed it back. They've done it again. We've clawed it back again. Then we went in front. They've clawed it back, and then we've clawed it back on them again. So I think it's going to be massive if we get them in the playoffs. I don't think that I'd be more confident about coming up against Rangers than I would against Queen of the South.
Okay, well, we'll go into that in about 5 minutes, but let's give Hibs their due and let's stay on them. Defensively, was there anything to be learned from the weekend, or were they, from what I've seen, they seemed completely untroubled by Falkirk this time around?
There was nothing really there. I mean, Oxley had his usual couple of flaps at a couple of crosses, but apart from that, there was never really, I can't even think of him having a meaningful save to make. The only sort of downside defensively is that Jordan Forster got an injury. It was, for where I was sitting, it looked like a head knock, and then the paramedics came out with this sort of like sit up wheelie stretcher that he looked absolutely embarrassed to be on as it wheeled its way around the two stands. But it was good defensively. It was good to see David Gray getting back in. I think it's, as unfortunate it is for Jordan, who was out for a while and he's now got back in the side, for this to happen. It's good to see David Gray getting back into the side exactly when we're going to need him.
Forster was definitely his ankle. It maybe looked like a head knock. I'm not quite sure. I think it was the way that, because he rolled about holding his ankle for about 20 seconds. But I thought Alan Stubbs was surprisingly flippant about it in the aftermatch interview, because Forster looked in agony for a period of time. But whether it was Stubbs not wanting to take the shine off second, it could be a wee bit more serious than that. In which case, again, it's the question of man management and keeping those positive vibes going out of the club. But you would hope that his flippancy was because actually it is just a bit of a strain, and given that there's now a fortnight off, he should be back. I think so, but for some reason I don't know why, but I just get a vibe that Stubbs doesn't rate him. Forster. Aye. The big thing in terms of the playoffs, though, discussing the defence, is Forster not vital because it gives that option of going to three at the back with three solid centre halves? Aye, he is. I mean, I personally rate him. I think he's excellent, and he's going to go on to much bigger things than Hibs. But there's just a vibe that I get between him and Stubbs that I don't know if Stubbs completely rates him. I don't know if he plays him because he's, apart from Hanlon and Fontaine, we've not got any other centre halves that are capable. We've got centre halves in the 20s, but none that are capable of sort of making that step up. So I don't know if he just persists with him because he's there, but for some reason I just didn't get that Stubbs likes him. Okay, let's do some quick hits through the rest of the squad then. Liam Craig's back. Connor would like to know your thoughts on that. He seems to have kind of semi-established himself again. Is that just because we're rotating prior to the playoffs, or is it because he's been unexpectedly good since he's come back in? I've not been Liam Craig's biggest fan, but hats off to him. I thought he had a good game on Saturday. I think what's impressed me about Craig, and it was the scene when El Alagui scored when he scored against Hearts, and sealed it. A lot of the sort of when you see Liam Craig on the pitch, he's a bit snarly, and he runs about, constant frown on his face. He's club captain, he's been dropped, he's not been in the team for however many weeks, and then when El Alagui scores, he's the one on the bench going absolutely mental. So I think that he knows that he's he was part of the side that that embarrassed us last season, and I think that now it's getting to the business end. He's got a point to prove. Whether he's playing for another contract with Hibs, whether he's playing for a contract elsewhere, he's got a bit of a fire in his belly, and I think it's going to be. I didn't really want him in the team because I think we've got better options. But if he's going to produce performances like he did on Saturday going into the playoffs, then it's only going to help us. Has he played well enough that you wouldn't be surprised to see his name in the first playoff fixture? Yeah. You wouldn't be surprised? No, I wouldn't be surprised. At whose expense?
I think if he's fit, McGeoch comes back in, so it'd probably be at 5s. Personally, I wouldn't, but I wouldn't put Craig in over 5, but if that's the way that Stubbs wants to go, then that's why he's the manager and I'm sitting here talking
so
about it.
So I take it we're assuming that Stubbs is going back to the diamond for the playoffs as well.
I think if Forster's injuries are a wee bit more serious than we think, and with Gray being fit again, because I don't see how you could drop Boyle, but then where does Boyle doesn't fit into the diamond?
No, it's interesting. That's what I mean. It's because in theory you've now Boyle over the last 3 games or so has really established himself as a threat going forward, but that was a job that David Gray was doing.
Unless he puts David Gray at centre half, maybe.
In a 3, but then you're only utilising 3 central midfielders in that formation as well, which means that
this I'm saying. Every time I talk about it, I get the picture in my mind of who the team is, and then a wee curveball gets,
and you realise you've got 13 players like Stuart Pearce back in the day. He only had 12, so you're even worse than him. It's interesting though, because we've spoken a lot about Hearts' squad this season, and it's one of the biggest things that have got them the title in the end, is that ability to constantly rotate. And we said at the start of the season Hibs just didn't have it, and then as the season's progressed, it's looked more and more like Hibs are starting to get it. I'm still not convinced that Hibs have got it in quite the same numbers, but they've probably actually got it at maybe a more consistent level of quality, and that there are now, as we say, there's probably 13 guys who can knock Alan Stubbs' door and say, and I deserve to be in the team. Is that great at this stage, or is it a real challenge for Stubbs to get the right players on the park?
I think it's a bit of both, because obviously if you've got players knocking on the manager's door saying, what a game, I deserve to play, then if they're not in the starting lineup, and we're needing a sub to come in and change the game, they've got the, I'm going to show them. I'll go and show what I should have done for the start. And I think that the consistency is a big thing with Hibs going back to the start of the season. I think if you were to go back and look at the lineups for the start, there was never a settled one. It was constantly chopping and changing. Like you'd have Matty Kennedy would be in the team for the start, then he wouldn't be seen for 2 weeks. Scott Allan, some people forget Scott Allan never started the season, as he's performed throughout it. He wasn't getting a start at the very beginning. So I think that we've got our core, the core of the team set. If they're all fit, Hanlon and Fontaine are the stick-on 2 centre halves. If we go with 3, Forster's in there. If we stay with 2, it's Gray and Stevenson either side. We never had that. We had Callum Booth playing it right back. At periods earlier on in the season. So I think that now that we've got a consistent, a set lineup. I don't know. Sam Stanton must have made God knows how many substitute appearances, because he's never really managed to break into the side. So it's good to have that. That settled lineup, but knowing that there's players literally champing at the bit to get in when they get a chance.
Okay.
Can I throw out quickly, just looking at it from a Hearts perspective, I think the only thing that works against Hibs with the squad rotation they've got, a lot of the players who have been rotating in and out for Hearts are some of the younger players who are expecting not to necessarily play every single game. You've seen it with Billy King, Sam Nicholson and Jamie Walker all season. However, when it's players like Fraser Fivey and Liam Craig, those slightly more experienced professionals who have been at other clubs and then found their way to Hibs, it's maybe that wee bit harder with sitting out games and then coming back on.
I know what you mean. Certainly as we go into the playoffs, which are just definitely the biggest, most important games of the season, it will be a big blow to anyone who's not in that situation, particularly if Hibs are on the end of a negative result and then this player is asked to go in for the next game. You've got to hope that they have the right attitude to go in there. Just as we segue on to a quick discussion about the playoff games to come prior to Hibs' involvement, how big are these games to come, Craig? Obviously we're going to touch on them loads over the next couple of weeks. We'll have playoff specials galore, purely building up to these games, but just give us an overall feel as we, before Hibs know who they're going to be coming up against, before they even have an inclination who's going to prevail from the Queen of the South Rangers ties. How important do these feel in the context of your time following Hibs?
like I said, I was there when we won the league in 99. You know, I didn't really understand football back then. Now, if I look at, you know, it's not as big as last season against Hamilton, but it's a very close second, because ultimately the two legs against Rangers or Queen of the South are going to help determine where we are next season. If we get beat, then we know where we are. If we win it, you know, we've then got another chance against whoever, looking like it's probably going to be Motherwell. You know, we've got a good chance to get back up, and that's all we want. You know, we want to be back in the top league. So it's, for me, who we play is irrelevant. Like I say, I would prefer Rangers, but either way, we still have to get past 4 games to get back into the league.
It's a weird thing to ask, but is it actually an indication of how much the club has changed and how much more kind of enthusiasm and energy there is around the club, that it's not as make or break as we would maybe expect? And that if Hibs were still essentially a broken club like they were at the end of last season, we'd be sitting here saying it's absolutely vital that Hibs get up. If they didn't, people simply we'd be sitting here saying, you know, if they don't get up, people simply won't renew season tickets. It'll be chaos, and it might have a lasting damage over the next 3 or 4 years. As it is, we're sitting here saying it's really important, but it's not make or break. It's not necessarily going to do long-term damage. If Hibs were to lose under whatever circumstances, at the moment it feels like they'll come back reinvigorated next season to try and do what Hearts have done this season. Is that how you see it?
I think so, aye. It's, you know, I think I've seen a post somewhere, I think it was maybe on the Bounce, that the season ticket uptake at this point is higher than what it was last season. And that was when we were still a Premier League club, and we weren't even, it was getting a wee bit scary looking at the situation that we could be in the playoffs, but it wasn't a foregone conclusion. Mm-hmm. You know, whereas now we literally do not know if we're going to be in the top league or in the Championship, and we've still got more people signing up. But I think if we don't go up this season, I think it'll be harder to get out of it next season than it would have this season. Okay. Purely because I think that Rangers will strengthen over the summer. Dave King will somehow wing his way into Ibrox. They'll spend big, as they always do. Whoever comes down will be eager to get back up. We've got Morton are coming up. Don't know who they could potentially be coming up.
So given that you seem to be assuming that Rangers are going to be in the league, is that assuming that you're going to then lose to Motherwell rather than lose to Rangers? And that'll kind of segue us on to talking about Rangers Queen of the South.
I think if we are, I don't think we'll lose the first game of the playoffs. I think if we are going to get beat, it'll be against the Premier League side. Okay,
let's preview for the first time ever, I think, a game that doesn't involve either Edinburgh club, because it has such a massive impact on the Edinburgh club. Rangers Queen of the South, we're all neutrals in this room. Kenny, how do you see that one going?
I think Queens have got a real chance. There's obvious deficiencies in that Rangers team. I don't think they're a unit. You don't know what you're going to get with them. Whereas Queen of the South, sort of guys who are hungry to get out of that league. And I'm not saying that Rangers haven't got guys like that, but I'd say as a club, Queen of the South they're I think more justifiable in terms of going up. There's guys in that Rangers team who won't be there next year. Guys like Haris Vukic, Rangers don't go down as they want to renew his contract here and get a permanent deal. I'd probably not. But I think Queens have got a real chance. You've seen it when just off the back of when Rangers turned us over at Ibrox, and I remember coming in and switching the game. I think it was on Alba, and Queens were 3-0 up, and I think where did that come from? So the Queens know they've got it in their locker, and I fancy them to do the business with our two legs. I really do.
Sean, how big a factor in this game is what Kenny's touched on there, this idea that Queen of the South will be desperate to defy the odds and go up because they're a club, whereas Rangers, yes, they will want to do it, but ultimately if the situation gets a wee bit sticky, there's 12 of those players currently out of contract thinking, well, I'll probably go up the level next season anyway. Is that going to play a part?
I think it can play a huge part. As Kenny touched on there, I mean, it's not just them looking to better the club going forward in the future. It's looking at a lot of those players bettering their own lives for their own families as well. No doubt there'll be a wage increase if they go up next season. It's also that you're playing at a higher level. Some of the younger players hoping to move on at some point in the future. It's a lot more of a short window playing in the Premier League as opposed to the Championship. There's surely just going to be, as we've seen it all season, there seems to be a lot of games where there shouldn't be. There's been a lack of desire from Rangers. There certainly should not be a lack of desire from Queen of the South, and we've already seen it over the course of the season. They can get results off all these teams. They really can. They've shown it. They've done it all season. Much like Falkirk have came up with results against the bigger teams as well. Queens can do it. That's the whole reason they're in there. So it's just a case of, can they step up to it on this occasion? And I definitely think it's going to be a lot tighter than some people will expect.
I don't know, I think we're maybe underestimating Lee Elbows McCulloch's desire for an extra few grand on top of his current 16 grand a week.
He'll still get it sitting on the bench.
That might make a difference for him. He needs to get that contract renewal sealed, because he's not getting that money anywhere else. Craig, who do you want to win? From a Hibs perspective, not necessarily just a we all hate Rangers perspective. From
a football fan, if I take it my Hibs leanings and look at it purely from a football fan's perspective, it's obviously the answer would be Queen of the South. You know, we've seen it in the Championship, done in England, came with Bournemouth doing this rise from nowhere to winning the league. You know, I think everybody, apart from Hibs fans and Rangers fans and Motherwell, Kilmarnock, whoever finishes 11th, they'll be willing Queen of the South to go up. Personally, from a Hibs perspective, I don't care. We're going to have to beat one or the other, so whoever it is, couldn't care less.
There's no style that you think you're better suited to playing against, or no players that you think are more likely to freeze on the big stage? Nothing at all?
Nah, just we need to beat them anyway, so whoever it is. The only thing I would say is that I think the one player that could make a difference would be that Vucic for Rangers. So I would maybe rather no face him.
What about thinking about the trips? Obviously, Ibrox is just generally a very nice place to go. Dumfries tends to be a lovely trip, but there's the daunting plastic pitch question. Is there either venue that you'd rather see Hibs play at in the next round?
Oh, for the going against the odds type thing, I'd love to go to Ibrox and be in that wee corner and be surrounded by them. I'd love that.
Fair enough. Right, let's move on from that discussion then, and we will wrap up with our Player of the Year chat. Craig, you don't need to because he's won it, but we'll ask just because I feel like there might be some disagreement in the room. Justify Scott Allan as a Hibbie, justify Scott Allan as Player of the Year. Obviously we didn't get the benefit of seeing him every single week like yourself. Why is he the Championship Player of the Year?
Because he's a baller. No, I think I think I'm obviously going to look at it through my Hibs glasses and say that, and it's only because I've not seen enough of Walker. Was it Walker, Gomez and Ozturk?
Yes.
That were up for it. If any of them, I would have said that Ozturk shouldn't have been near it. You've got Walker and Gomez could maybe be. It could have been either one of the three. I didn't get the loving for Ozturk at all. I think it's skewed by that absolute toe poke that used to go. No, I think Scott Allan's...
That's a Jimmy Hill statement now, man.
Scott Allan's like I say, he couldn't get in the team at the start of the season, but he's been pivotal to the way that we've played over the past sort of 6-7 months. And I think it all comes, if you look at if I could pick one game, if you ask me why Scott Allan's Player of the Year, and I can pick one game to choose it, and it would be the 4-1 game against Rangers. 4-0 game, against Rangers at Easter Road. Okay,
I'm going to ask a question to you, and then I'm going to lead it over to the Jambo guys. I want to give you an opportunity to get your kind of answer in first. Do the Hearts players suffer from a lack of, essentially from competition within their own team? There's not necessarily been a stick out player for Hearts. I know we can say that based on the team of the year, there were a couple of other stickouts at Hibs in Lewis Stevenson and David Gray. Stevenson, I think, less so in that it was a bit more of a slow burner. It's more about consistency over the season in the left back position. David Gray undoubtedly was different class for large chunks of the season, but has been quite injury hit as well, which I think has taken him out of the reckoning for player of the year. So Scott Allan then stands alone as the guy who has carried Hibs through that period and always been, you know, the 8 out of 10 player in the centre of the park. Hearts have had a wide array of kind of 8 out of 10s and guys that have carried them for 3 games, 4 games at a time and then left it to everyone else. Is that, you think, why Scott Allan is, you know, stands out from the rest of Hearts, because it was simply quite difficult to pick one to get the Hearts votes?
Well, I think so. I think if you look at it, you know, because obviously it's the players that have voted for it, you know, so it's the players that they've played against, so they've obviously got a better, you know, they can say better than what we can because we just watch the games.
Well, you say that, but speak to some modern day footballers.
But no, I think you've, you know, like I say, I'm looking at it through Hibs glasses, and the fact that for me Scott Allan's a deserved winner, but I think that someone like Jamie Walker especially suffers from, you know, there's been, you know, because you could even, if you take out Ozturk, you know, you could easily have So in there for the way that he started the season. You could have Payard, you know, there was a lot of Hearts fans were saying that Payardo should have been involved in that. So it's easy enough to, you know, and if I take Scott Allan out for Hibs, who else do I put in? You know, clutching at straws to say Jason Cummins, but that's purely because he's the top goal scorer in the league. So I think that while Hearts fans, I would say that Walker especially is maybe a bit unlucky, because I think that he's, I think if I was to pick one player for Hearts that's impressed me this season, really, it'd be Jamie Walker.
Okay, I feel the need to slightly qualify my modern day footballer statement. That's a reflection of no one that we have spoken to and no one at either clubs. It's more thinking of Virgil van Dijk, who voted for Andrew Shinney as player of the year. Who doesn't he play in Scotland? Graham Shinney does, who I'm assuming he meant to vote for. Right, so Jambos, what do we think? Are we happy to accept Scott Allan as Championship Player of the Year for the reasons that Craig gave?
I was slightly resigned to it already. I thought it was going to be detrimental to any Hearts player winning it, purely because there was 3 Hearts names in the hat, so it would draw votes from, it would split the votes for a Hearts player between those. I've not got a huge problem with Scott Allan getting it. I've touched on it at points this season. There's been, like, he's definitely been the driving force behind Hibs in a lot of games. There's still slight things that can be improved on, like his goal record, which we've seen other players shining, like Jamie Walker. He's the only midfielder to be so high up the charts, in the scoring charts this season. But I think it is down to, he was the shining light in that Hibs team, whereas there's been quite a few. It's been on a week-to-week basis who's been the shining light in the Hearts team, which has been detrimental to having a player of the season coming from that Hearts team. But in the greater scheme of things, I don't think they'll mind it that much. Okay. There's plenty of time, especially Jamie Walker, there's plenty of time for him to win awards in the future. His main objective was getting up to the Premier League for next season.
Kenny?
It's difficult. I think for every player, as touched on earlier with Scott Allan, it's a Player of the Year, and Scott Allan wasn't really getting a look in at the start. But the same goes for the 3 Hearts nominees for me. Walker, certainly when he was playing wide, was rotated with your Kings and your Nicholsons. Ozturk, now again, as the season's gone on, I've become a big fan of the guy. But in the early stages of the season, the word bomb scare did apply to Ali Ozturk at times. There
was a certain Zaliukas factor.
Yes, there was. I think it was ambition getting mixed up with ability at times, but he's I think he's progressed really well. Gomez, again, early doors was instrumental in Hearts runs, the winning runs and whatnot. He has had a bit of a dip in form, I think. He has, obviously, but the whole Payardo factor coming in has kind of maybe not papered over the cracks with that, but it's certainly helped. You look at Scott Allan and his contribution, the one thing that sticks out for me is that whenever I've seen Hibs live, that's been the derbies this season. he's the one player when he gets on the ball, I think, on that kind of thing, something could happen. I might be wrong, but I'm fairly certain it was him that crossed the ball for Cummins
it
at
was
Tynecastle.
That was the goal that we had the commentary on earlier.
Just in front of me, and he wasn't even facing that. It was how he's generally, it's talent at the end of the day, that's what it is. And 2 assists on Saturday, I think it was as well. I agree with Sean, the goal scoring record something he needs to improve on, but you know, as long as his attitude and his application's right, for me, he can go far. It's difficult. Again, there's discrepancies with all the nominees, but I'd say potentially just edges it. Begrudgingly say that.
Also, just to say there, Kenny, we all know that it's never, although it's player of the season or young player of the season, whatever the trophy is, it's never actually over the course of the season. How you end the season has a huge impact on it. Harry Kane never got a start for the first 10-15 games of the season for Tottenham, and yet has absolutely coasted his way to young player of the season.
The only thing I take issue with there is it's not actually how you end the season, because the votes are in so early that they didn't necessarily see how you end the season. The big thing here is that the important things have been decided already. It's really that period from kind of January to mid-April.
You forget it because we had the league sewn up so early on.
Okay, on that,
sorry, Craig.
On that slight dig, we will start to wrap things up. So, player of the year, I think we're all kind of mildly satisfied with that. We can see, I think the big thing there as well is that, and it was the reason that Craig Gordon was being mentioned for player of the year in the SPL, and in the end didn't get it, wasn't even nominated, but there was a big groundswell of support for him. I think he was the bookies' favourite for a period of time, and it was all because of the story, that redemption story. Scott Allan's got a wee bit of that, and that he looked like he potentially could have been one of those guys who was just lost to the game, went down to England, came back, frittered about a wee bit and then just disappeared, whereas he's now solidified himself as being back.
Well, that's his first full season as a professional footballer. Like, and you know, if you think of the name Scott Allan, you've heard it for a wee while. You know, if you go back to when he was at Dundee United.
I think it was about something like 20-25 games when he actually signed for Hibs.
So he's played more games this season for Hibs than he had in his, whatever it was, 4 or 5 years previous.
Which is crazy.
Aye.
But it's potentially.
But that's what I mean. Like, it's the story. This is Scott Allan trying to show that he's not this. You know, because there was some sort of perceived attitude about Scott Allan that he was this, you know, Billy Big Time. You know, he thought he was.
I'm glad you went with time.
You know, he thought he was. thought he was bigger or better than what he is, and I've not seen that from Scott Allan at all. I think the way that he comes across, he's a very humble person, and I think that going forward for next season, I think that if Hibs don't go up, he'll sign a new contract. For some reason, I think that he'll really, especially now that he's won the Player of the Year, he'll think that he owes Stubbs and the fans and the club quite a bit. I think he'll sign a new contract. I hope he does. Please stay, Scott. There you go.
The desperation set in at the end there. No, it's a good point that you bring up, because it goes against what I've seen and witnessed in most other quarters. Most people seem to be resigned to that idea that he just won't stay if you go up. But you're right, maybe he does feel that he owes the club something, because they have kind of taken him off the footballing scrap heap to an extent. Okay, on that note, we will start to wrap up. MondayNightFootball.com is the place to go. We are trying to make it a place that you can visit, not just to listen to this show, but for numerous other things. So as we say, the forum is there. Get involved on the forum. We are on there on a regular basis, so if you have any questions that you want to ask us, any topics you want us to bring up on the show, that is the place to raise them. We can have a wee discussion and set them up. The blog is there. We've got a number of different bloggers getting involved now. If you would like to be one of those, then there is a contact section on the website. You can get in touch with us through Twitter, through the Facebook, or through the email. There's a form on there. Just complete that. It'll come straight over to the email, which incidentally is mondaynightfootball@gmail.com. If you've any interest in helping us out, the big thing we're looking for at the moment, you'll notice on the website there's a lot going on there, but there's not necessarily that many photos. We could do with some talented amateur photographers, not that kind, the kind that take their camera to the Fitba and take some photos of the Hearts and the Hibs games. We will give you loads of promotion. We will sing your praises. We'll shout it from the rooftops if you let us use some of your photos on the website, because we could do with getting a wee bit more colour on there. Okay, any other business, guys? Anything before we wrap up? Sean, you look like you're champing at the bit.
On the media stakes, anyone who either missed Hearts lifting the cup or just wants to relive it again, we've got a video up there that you can check out on the website as well, so go on and check that out.
We have, and thank you very much for your camera work on that, Sean.
That's alright. I had to stay quiet while filming it, which was a wee bit annoying when your team's lifting the league for the first time you've ever seen it, but I could bear it.
Okay, and we are hoping to have more video content over the summer months. You'll see our ugly mugs on there a wee bit more, in addition to our panellists pages, of which, Kenny, we'll need to get you a panellist page now.
Happy days.
And now that you've joined the Monday Night Football family, thank you very much for joining me, guys. Stay tuned for a night of music on Radio Saltire. Thank you as always for listening to Monday Night Football. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.